Scott, how are you? Great.
No speakers, is there?
I'm sorry?
No speakers?
None that I'm aware of.
Everybody ready to go? Call to order a regular meeting for the Normal Town Council for September 5th, 2017. Please call the roll.
Mayor Kus?
Here.
Mr. Fritzen?
Here.
Mr. McBride?
Here.
Mrs. Cummings? Here. Mrs. Lorenz?
Here.
Mr. Preston?
Here.
Mr. McCarthy?
Here.
We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We start with the omnibus agenda. There were no requests for public comment, by the way. So we're starting with the omnibus agenda items considered routine in nature and will be taken by a singular vote unless a council member would like to pull an item for discussion. And I would like to be excused from voting on any bills that may have occurred in my duties as mayor. Mr. McBride?
I'd like to be excused from voting on the GLT bill.
Mr. Fritzen?
I'd be asked to be excused from voting on any expenses I might have incurred in my duties as a council person.
Ms.
And I
Lorenz?
too would like to excuse myself from an expense that I may have incurred.
I'm sorry?
Excuse myself from the item that I may have incurred.
Thank you.
Move approval?
Thank you.
Second.
Items on the omnibus agenda being considered for a vote tonight are approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of August 21st, 2017, and approval of the town of Normal expenditures for payment as of August 30th, 2017. A resolution to approve bids and award a contract to Stark Excavating Incorporated in the amount of $132,714.75, and that is for sidewalk improvement on Beach Street, Fell Avenue, and University Street. A resolution waiving the bid requirements for a sole source provider, authorizing the execution of a contract with Whitewater West Industries Limited for professional engineering services and refurbishing of the Fairview Family Aquatic Center drop slides. A resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with the Benefit Technology Resources for the acquisition of benefit administration system B-Swift. A resolution to waive the formal bid process or procedure and accept a quote from Central Illinois Truck Repair to repair a 2004 Pierce fire engine, and that is in the amount of $69,374. A resolution authorizing a third amendment to the billing service agreement with Acumed Billing Incorporated, and that's for ambulance billing. An ordinance amending parking restrictions on Orr Street between Hanson Drive and College Avenue in the town of Normal. And an ordinance amending Division 14 of Chapter 22 of the Code of Ordinances to change distance requirements for video gaming establishments. Prior distances were 200 feet lot line to lot line, and we are amending that to 200 feet from building front to building front. Please call the roll.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Cummings?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The omnibus agenda is approved. We have 4 items of general orders tonight. The first is a presentation by Jamie Wilkie, partner at Lauterbach and Amon CPA firm, on the town's annual financial statements and audit report. Jamie?
Good evening. This evening, we have to present to you the comprehensive annual financial report for the town for the fiscal year ended March 31st, 2017. First of all, I'd just like to briefly kind of describe the audit process itself. It is a 6-month process, roughly, from start to finish. Pretty intensive back and forth with the finance department staff. That involves testing, obviously, balances at year end, as well as the activity for the fiscal year, along with assessing the town's control environment. So making sure we have good internal controls that we as the auditors can rely upon within our testing of those balances. I know there's a large group of the finance team here this evening. This is our first year auditing the town. I can honestly say I don't know that we've come into a community as well organized, prepared, professional as we found the department here. So I just wanted to thank them this evening for all of their efforts. Certainly a lot of hard work goes into preparing for the auditors, so thank you to Andrew and the rest of the team. I also want to point out, given that we were so organized, we had a very clean audit process. I have no internal control issues to bring forth this evening. You will find within the comprehensive annual financial report a clean audit opinion. You'll also find that the town received what we call the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. That is a third-party independent review of the financial statements. That award is, in fact, for last year's audit, so we can't really take credit for that, but we obviously assume we will be receiving the award again this year. You'll find a copy of that award in the introductory section of the report. I do want to point out one other key area within the basic financial statement area. That is what we call the management's discussion and analysis. So as you are reviewing your CAFR, you will find that within the financial section tab of that report. The MD&A, as we call it, is provided on pages MD&A 1 through 12. This is really what we consider to be the executive summary to the CAFR. It is a very large document. I know there are a lot of numbers and disclosures. It gets cumbersome as you go from front to back to get through that document. I would encourage you to read those 12 pages in detail. That is in fact prepared by staff, really intended to be high-level executive summary to the audit. You'll find information provided on revenue and expenditure trends, capital asset investments for the year, as well as long-term debt activity. The other section I want to point out is actually the last tab of that large document. It's what we call our statistical section. This is where you'll find all kinds of 10-year trend information for the town, covering both financial data as well as non-financial data. So I always think it's a good supplement to that management discussion and analysis, the 12-page executive summary, because really there is a wealth of information under that statistical tab. I do also want to point out we had what we call a single audit, that is for federal funds in excess of $750,000. So there are some additional internal control procedures that have to be conducted, as well as a separate opinion on those federal funds. I'm happy to also say there were no findings with regards to the federal awards, and certainly a clean opinion that was issued as well. I would be happy to answer any specific questions that you all might have. I was going to stay away from some of the number-specific things, but really just wanted to reiterate what a clean audit process, especially for a year one audit.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Don't think so.
We
Thank you.
appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Item 8 is a resolution to accept the audited Town of Normal financial statements and report of internal controls from the town auditors, Lauterbach and Amon CPA firm for the year ending in March 31st, 2017.
Move approval. Second.
Is there discussion on this item? Please call the roll.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Cummings?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The resolution is passed. Number 9 is a resolution to accept the federal compliance audit for the year ending March 31st, 2017.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Discussion on this item. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Cummings?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The resolution is approved.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
can I just,
You may.
I just want to acknowledge there's several people of our finance staff, along with Andrew Hune, that are here. Raise your hand, please. A clean audit doesn't happen by accident. It's because we have pros out there doing the work. And I appreciate, Ms. Wilkie, your comment, but the credit goes to the staff. They're outstanding. We're very, very fortunate. And I thought it was only appropriate that they be acknowledged this evening. So thank you all. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 10 is a resolution accepting a professional services proposal from GovHR USA to assist the town council in the recruitment and selection of a city manager and to approve a general fund budget adjustment for this engagement.
Move approval.
Thank you. Is there discussion on this item? Mr. McBride?
I think we all recognize just how important this process is going to be, and we've talked and we'll talk more about how enormous the shoes of the current occupant of that offices will be to fill. I have some concerns about the scope of this particular engagement. I'm of the opinion that I believe we can recruit a diverse and very deep talent pool, including internal candidates. And certainly there are some things that we can't do ourselves, but I'm not sure that this can't be done in a different manner, more expeditiously and without the expense. So therefore, I'm not inclined to vote in favor of this proposal.
Further discussion on this? I would add that, noting your opinion on this, and we'd had that discussion before, but just for the general audience, there is a significant larger scope of activity as part of this, just to be clear on that. It's not just for recruitment, but HR services, some background work, things like that. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen,
Aye.
Mr. McBride,
No.
Mrs. Cummings,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye, the resolution is approved. That concludes our general orders. We have two items of new business tonight. The first is presentation of the fiscal year 2016-2017 financial trend and condition report by the ever-popular Andrew Hunn.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I do appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about this report each year. As you know, we do this annually. It's kind of a wrap-up of the audit cycle and the financial report, and also serves as kind of a preamble and tone for the budget process coming forward. I do want to echo the comments and appreciate very much Jamie's comments and Mr. Prieston's comments, and my staff does a great job. I don't want to set the expectation of no findings every year, but we certainly will strive for that.
I think they've already been set.
Yeah.
Too late.
The presentation today is on the condition of the town financially and our financial trend report. It's very typical from previous fiscal years. We look at 34 indicators. In terms of background, we evaluate those indicators based on a positive or a negative or unclassified. Unclassified simply means that it's education information only. We span those indicators across 6 different categories. You can see there in the slide, from community revenue to balance sheet, and of course our financial strategies. And of course we have no changes in terms of the number of categories that we looked at this year or next. In terms of year to year, last year of course was the previous year, 15-16. We had 21 positive comments in the report, 7 negative, and 6 unclassified, for a total of 34. This year, you know, a little less optimistic. We will go into some detail on some slides. I'll go past some slides pretty quickly, and some I'll kind of linger on to share some deeper comments, but I promise to keep it as concise as possible in terms of your time tonight. The first one we always look at, and it's always a very significant picture of the town's economy, is assessed value for the town. Right now, about $162 million of assessed value here in the town of Normal. You can see over the 10-year span about 1.87% growth annually per year. I do want to focus a little bit on this slide to give you some additional information. One, look at these years from 2010 to 2015, just last year. You can see relatively flat growth or even some decreases a couple years there. The average for that time period is about ½ a point of growth each year. Now you can see that we did have what I would characterize as a strong year in 2016, 3.1% growth in assessed value, which is very good. I do want to point out that about 80% of that 3.1% increase came from a multiplier. In terms of recap, a multiplier is when the assessor raises the level of assessed value for all properties up. And what they do each year is they look at sales data compared to assessed value market data. And if the sales are running hotter than what the assessed value is showing, they increase everyone's assessed value up. So the multiplier this year, and it was the first one since '09, was 2.4%. So the remaining 7% on top of that, 2.1, is just the inherent increase in value. In talking with the assessors going forward for next year, we'll likely see what we've been seeing in the past from 2015 to 2015, about a ½ a point increase in overall assessed value. We probably won't likely have a multiplier next year, like we haven't had one since '09. This is the first one in a long time. Now still considered growth for sure, because we are seeing that the sales price of the properties is outstripping the assessed value, so they brought the assessed value up to recognize that market value increase. So a good thing. Next slide, not such a good thing, and this is something we've been tracking for some time, and it should be no surprise to this council. As you see this report every single year, ridership at the airport is continuing to decrease, at least for the last, since 2011. Now, we did have a bit of a bump this year, which was nice to see. The decreases over the last 4 years from 2011 have been essentially carriers dropping out of the market here. First Allegiant and then Frontier. We're not sure where this is going to go. We kept it at negative in terms of the trend, although we did see an increase in ridership from last year to this year. It's a very small increase. And the backdrop of that significant drops in the last 4 years just wasn't quite to give us that sense of, we probably could say positive with caution or something like that, but you can kind of make your own determination. Our hope is that we've kind of, not to characterize it, we've hit the bottom perhaps of that drop off, and that we'll start to see now either a nice flattening or maybe even some increases in ridership. The next slide, we'll go through. I'm not going through all the slides, of course, of the report. And we can discuss any ones you like, but we're kind of picking a few of them that we typically pick each year. Next one is unemployment rate. Again, a good story here. Everybody is seeing a decrease in their unemployment rate, which is a good thing. The town actually saw a pretty significant decrease, and in terms of our comparison to our partners, the local governments, were at that time the lowest rate, which is nice to see. A bit of a backdrop on that, though, is, again, back to kind of a negative skew. The county workforce, again, not a surprise in terms of what the council seen in the past. We continue to see a drop-off in county workforce. We did see a small bump last year, and we actually flipped this to positive with caution last year with kind of this optimistic view of what was going to happen. We thought, well, now we've kind of hit the bottom and we'll start to see some growth. But then, of course, the numbers came back this year, and we saw another drop-off, about a 1.5 points or so. So we went back to negative. And this is actually one of the charts that we went from positive to negative on in terms of the 21 from last year to 19 this year in terms of positive recognition for the indicator. We're going to watch this very closely. Everyone's kind of aware of it in terms of workforce issues for the county, and we'll continue to watch it closely going forward. But right now, we're considering it as certainly a negative. This slide's really just to show the overall revenue mix of the town's revenue. You can see the different pie charts in terms of what's the most significant. Clearly, local sales tax has grown a bit in terms of its overall piece of the pie because of the 1% increase recently. And we are starting to see a little more reliance on both local and state sales tax, which you can argue in terms of that. We're still within a fairly good parameter, but again, we are relying on that, and that's one of the main sources of revenue for any municipality. Next slide, we're going to dive a little deeper into some of the revenues and some of the problematic ones. State income tax is one of those revenues that we have some concerns about. We have it rated as negative at this time. Focus a little bit, again, a little bit of a story to tell here, and I've told it before, but it's worth kind of for the background. We had quite a bit of increases in those years, 2012, 2013, 2014, some big increases, 8.1, 11, 8%. 2015, kind of bounced off, so the bump from the recession and recovery was done. And then 2016 gave us a bit of a surprise, and frankly surprised every municipality in terms of what came in. We researched this pretty heavily with Department of Revenue analysts, and didn't really get not a good answer from them or one that we could understand until around July of the fiscal year 16-17. We've discussed in the past it was kind of a one-time bump due to capital earnings on investments from 2014 that was finally distributed in terms of tax money, and then also the shift away from the change in income tax rate and the distribution formula that kind of gave us a one-time boost in revenue that year. So the current year, significantly down from that year, 11.3%. Probably a more comparable year to the previous 2 years without 2016 in the mix with a one-time bump. It's concerning because we're seeing it actually drop off. If you want to look at just where we're at in terms of this year compared to last year, in 2017, we're actually below we were in 2014 and 2015, which is problematic. Working again closely with analysts and Department of Revenue, what they've shared with us is they look at actually every tax return that corporations submit, that individuals submit, and they do quite a bit of analysis on those information to see what's happening in the tax code and what's happening with tax income tax. What they've told us recently, and it makes some sense, is there is some fundamental pressure on that's diluting your income tax receipts for all local governments. A couple of things are happening that they shared with us in terms of tax code. The first thing is where they're seeing a lot of corporations, C Corps, shift over to an S Corp. because they have a less tax liability. So we're getting less tax from basically the same entity if they can make that formation switch. They're also saying that there was a tax law change in terms of what corporations could push their tax returns in terms of net operating losses. Either the cap's been lifted or entirely removed. So now corporations recently, the last couple of years, have been pushing through quite a few losses on their tax returns and then reducing their tax liability. So, and this is straight out from the analysts at Department of Revenue saying that's happening, and it's kind of diluting some of the income tax that we're receiving. Then again, also, you can just look at the global issues in the state in terms of wage growth and job market. So there are some things that we are concerned about there. We're not likely to see a lot of increase in income tax next year, but we will certainly manage it through the budget process. Next slide just shows the property tax distribution rate among all the taxing jurisdictions in the community. This includes, of course, the town, the library, Heartland Community College, the airport. Unit 5 is the biggest one. You can see by that chunk, about 60%. The town's right around 10%, 11% each year. We like to stay in that zone, if that's a proper word to use, in terms of the funding. I will share that we're going to have some upward pressure on the tax rate this year. As you're all aware, the pensions remain problematic and will for a long time. And there will be some pressure to increase the tax levy to make up for those pension issues. So that's coming to you in the next few months in terms of a rate recommendation. Kind of going further into the property tax realm, you can see the town, just the town's rate is, again, at 11.2% of the total tax bill. Right now is the lowest among our peers, and it's been like that for many, many years, which certainly is a good thing in terms of property tax bill to community members and so forth. In terms of the overall property tax bill, where we're talking again the entire jurisdictions that tax in the town, again, Heartland Community College, Unit 5, the town, library, and so forth. If you combine all those together, our tax rate is, certainly in the top 4 in terms of the lowest among our community peers. So that's always a good thing to see too, and that's essentially just, kind of constant due diligence on budgeting and managing the dollars. Switching again to a negative picture, and this one is equally frustrating for a lot of people, utility tax revenue. You can see that it's been shifting downward significantly the last 4 years in a row. 2014, fairly flat, but a decrease. And then we had a 4.4, 4.6, and 5.2, all in 3-year period. Those are significant numbers to be dropping down. And you've seen this chart before, and every year we do this chart, we're kind of hopeful we're on the bottom of that, and we essentially budget a flat revenue going in the next 5 years, and we get to this point in the game, we discover it's going down again. Currently, the numbers are showing this trend is continuing through the current period. We're seeing about a 4.8% drop off in our revenue year to year for the same period. Haven't got a lot of months to compare it against, but again, the story continues to be this same drop. So what's happening with this revenue source? And I think you all have kind of speculation. I've heard a lot of interesting things about it, and I think a lot of them make sense. In terms of electricity and gas, we can blame some of it occasionally on a mild winter and a mild summer, and that certainly has an impact, and they've been fairly mild. But there's again some things going on here in terms of efficiency with air conditioning systems and heating systems, efficiency in building codes, new technologies on thermostats. And the town, we charge our tax rate based on consumption, not on the total bill. So as people get wiser and systems get more efficient, and then we have a mild summer or a mild winter, it really pushes down that revenue because we're charging on consumption only. In terms of cable TV, that medium is in a serious technology flux, as everyone knows. People are shifting from traditional cable outlets. There's significantly more competition in the market. Prices are coming down. People are shifting their habits to internet only and watching Netflix versus Showtime and MovieFone and HBO and so forth. Even in my personal experiences, we had a cable bill of north of $150 a month and just got tired of paying that much, and now we're internet only in a few basic channels and getting our news and media through other means online. So that you're seeing a drop-off in that revenue source because there's a drop-off in, again, due to competition and due to other options to see things. And then, of course, telephone is been going on for probably a decade now, or since the cell phone came out. What's happening there is cell phones are still being taxed the telecommunications fee, but just the plan that relates to talk and text get that tax. The data plan associated with what you pay in total bill is not taxed telecommunications-wise. And carriers are reducing that talk and text piece a lot smaller compared to a landline, which, you know, you have full bill, and also long distance now is free and been free for forever in terms of cell phone usage. So we're losing landlines, we've lost long distance phone call for the most part, and now the carriers are essentially reducing the plan down to just talk and text, which is what's taxed, and the data plan, which is online streaming, that's not being taxed at all. So again, all these things are fundamentally pushing this revenue down, and clearly it's happening in terms of what we're seeing. State and local sales tax, again, it's not to stay on a negative theme. I do have some positive comments at the end, trust me. So what's happening with these? Well, we're seeing a flattening and essentially a decrease. Over the last 2 years, we've seen a drop of, my glasses, basically just a small drop in 2016, 2017, 3.2% for state. You can see that we saw some nice increases in the local side of things, but that, of course, is the rate increase that was partially impacted in 16 and then significantly impacted in 17. If you remove the impacts of that rate increase in this analysis, then we actually go to about a 1.2% increase the previous year and 3.9% drop this year. So we rated this as negative simply because we're seeing a flattening of this revenue source and essentially a decreasing, which is concerning because it's a major source for us in terms of balancing the budget and providing services. This tracks, unfortunately, very closely to workforce, too, what we've seen in terms of analysis we've done. So it's not surprising that we're seeing that drop off. Again, it's problematic, and we'll watch it continually. Moving to expenses, done with revenue. Moving to expenses, this is just a pie chart again. It shows for the readers and interested parties where the mix is. Again, you can look at this chart and see that primarily the money is going to police and fire and inspections, kind of public work type activities, as well as contractual agreements and debt, community services, parks and rec, and also uptown and fire stations and so forth. So a lot going on in this chart, but it just basically kind of gives the reader a sense of where a lot of the spending is going to. Again, no particular negative or positive, it's just for information only. Overlapping debt, good story here. Overlapping debt is the debt that every jurisdiction in the town carries. This, of course, is the Heartland, Unit 5, ourselves, the airport, and so forth. We are continuing to see a drop in that, and that basically we're paying the debt off, and no one's issued new debt, or they've issued refunding like we have over the years. Our debt as an organization has dropped also from year to year. Another positive thing to see, about $1.7 million down from the previous year. So we're seeing, a payoff, and overall our debt program is fairly mature now, and we have what Todd Kraskowski from Mesro Financial likes to call a downward sloping debt curve, which is nice to see. It gives us some capacity in the future, and we continue to have a AAA rating through Fitch and high ratings from the other two agencies. So debt is actually continues to be a highlight and a positive for us in terms of the turmoil of the revenue situation and so forth. Fund balance for the general fund, again, we talked about the flattening and decreasing the decreasing of income tax and state sales tax and local sales tax, with the exception of the rate increase. Utility tax dropping off, and you can't have those things happen in a year and not expect to have some kind of deficit in the general fund. It wasn't a huge hit. It was negative, which we typically don't end on a negative note in terms of deficit in general fund. We still maintain a strong fund balance there. Still, we put it positive with caution because of our concerns going forward with major revenues and the small deficit that we did experience this year. But again, we are going into the budget year with a fairly positive fund balance. Pensions, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these. I think the council is well aware of the situation here, and we will be coming back to you for the property tax levy discussion in the next few months. Again, we continue to see a drop in our funding level, both with police and fire. There's no surprise here. It's the interest environment for the market. You know, the employees are paying their portion, the town's paying our portion based on what I would characterize as a prudent and reasonable and aggressive funding plan. But the market's not returning to us what we need in terms of that, and this is a problem that every municipality or pension plan is facing. So decisions to come on that, the council's well aware of it, and same situation with fire. IMRF, the good story there, continues to be a well-funded plan. The town doesn't control that at all. We just simply pay the bill we get from IMRF, and IMRF is, I would characterize as a well-run pension plan with very strong professional staff behind it, so a good positive story there. Water fund, looking fine. Again, we had growth in our cash and investments year to year, so our liquid equity in the fund remains strong. We had some growth in revenue, not a lot, but about a little over 2%, which is nice to see. So the story there remains positive. Sewer fund, we did book this as negative, and you might be saying, well, what's going on there? We've solved this problem. We have solved a lot with it. As you know, the council passed, first did a significant assessment of our physical infrastructure needs, and also on top of that, put in a 5 to 6 year rate structure just recently. We have it negative here because this has been the trend in the fund. Later on, I'll talk in a few slides, I'll discuss the outlook is much more positive because of those adjustments that have been made by the council. Health insurance fund had a little bit of I don't want to characterize it as a surprise because we knew it was coming during the year. We were watching the balances each year. We had what I characterize as a bad claim year. You know, that's what it basically amounts to. We do some deep research each month, and we are seeing some increases in claim activity and some increases more than expected in terms of specialty drugs and prescription drug costs. But honestly, it was a bad year. We maintain a fairly strong fund balance to deal with years like this. Given the relatively small employee base we have, if we have a handful of claims that are not typical in a year, we'll see an increase in expenses. But again, the council and the staff keep a strong balance here just for this situation. There have been some recent plan changes. We put this as positive with caution because of the significant drop. But again, 1.6 million of fund balance is still there, which is probably more than what most would keep in this plan. We have a pretty aggressive target. We're below target right now, but I'm not worried about this fund, and admin's not worried about it. I think we'll see it recover over time. In terms of, we're kind of moving on to the section where we talk more about the outlook in terms of our financial strategies. These, of course, are strategies we've had in place for many years, and they kind of give us a roadmap of our finances going forward and help us with decisions. They're not mandated in terms of what to do, but they give us a guidance. We did add this year to it the water reserve level and the sewer reserve levels. We've talked about water reserve targets since '09, and we never recognized it formally in this presentation, but we do, as the budget process each year, track that target to make sure we're on key. And we just essentially formalized the sewer targets with your action a few months ago in terms of the capital planning, the assessment planning, and then the new rate structure. So those will be reported going forward in this process each year. And it gives us a meaningful plan to watch those things. In terms of a review, general fund reserves, again, we're looking for 15% liquidity in the general fund, 15% of our expenditures and transfers out. We are slightly below that target in our adopted budget. It's positive outlook with caution because given the revenue trends and some other things I'll discuss shortly, we're going to have a challenging budget year, so it's very likely we'll be below our target in those years during this next budget cycle. Vehicle and equipment reserve, we're currently below our target in years 4 and 5 of the adopted budget, and that will likely be unchanged going forward in this budget year also. Again, we still have significant funds over there. We're still pay-as-you-go in that fund. But we are heading into some uncertainty with this budget year that might put some more stress on that money. Contingency funds, we rated as a negative. We did have to pull back on our contingency funds this last budget year, so we're not where we ideally want to be. We're hopeful to get those returned, but I think it's likely, given the stresses we're having on this budget year in terms of revenue, we'll probably have some challenges there with contingency funds. Again, not getting where we want to be in an ideal world. Debt management, no issues there. Our coverage ratios are strong. Our model works perfectly fine. It's certainly all within our parameters of revenue capacity, and so sinking funds, so we're fine there. Nothing much more to say there. Insurance reserve fund, again, we had the big drop in 16, 17 that we saw happening. We know what occurred, basically a bad claim year, some pretty significant increases in specialty drug use. New plan policies will help mitigate a lot of that, and again, we keep a strong fund balance just for those things that occur. We are a little below the target now, but I think we'll climb out of that and probably be fine in the next few years. But again, it's in a strong position. I don't want to raise the red flag per se on that, and I don't want to overstate it. Water reserve, not so much time here. Again, reserve is strong in terms of operational reserve. In terms of capital reserve, it's also okay. Same situation for sewer. Now our outlook is positive outlook with caution, simply because we're not there yet. We're still, I guess, kind of skipping along the bottom in terms of financial sustainability for the sewer fund. However, the action that the council took to deal with the capital needs and deal with the rate structure will start to sweep us up the next 4 to 5 to 6 years to where we have a nice target there. So again, the outlook's positive because of those decisions, and we foresee it being positive. We're going to have to wait a few years for that to actually kind of materialize. So kind of some summary comments here, and then I'll get to some final comments. Community indicators, we have some concerns with the airport and workforce. Assessed values looking stable. So again, we kind of carry some concerns. Revenue, we have significant concerns. I think that's evidenced by the information shared tonight with income tax and sales tax and utility tax. Expenditures, nothing new going on there. Nothing unusual. We'll watch that closely, but it's basically the same process that we do, and nothing extraordinary coming down the line that we're aware of. Debt service, debt service, again, no concerns there. Fund balance, some mild concerns with going into the fiscal year. Again, still strong balances across the board, but we're going into some uncertainty in terms of revenue and so forth. And then financial raise, again, some concerns there. That's probably overstates a little bit, but we're always going to be a little on the negative side, at least in terms of pessimistic from the finance department. A couple budget challenges, and I've already kind of mentioned a lot of them, so I won't discuss it. The first two, we've already kind of covered them. The third and fourth bullet there point are some meaningful discussions to have, and I'll give you my thoughts. The loss of the MetroZone revenue, it hurts the town. It is problematic. And again, I know that there's a sensitivity to that issue, and I don't mean to bring up any kind of judgment on it at all. I think I'm uniquely positioned to share some thoughts because we've been accounting for those transactions for over a decade and under my tenure. So we've been translating the agreement of the MetroZone into transactions and revenue in the budget. And I know we're all familiar with the MetroZone. There are some folks that might not be, so a quick 30 seconds on the MetroZone. To help kind of facilitate the comments at the end. The MetroZone is kind of this geographical area on the west side that was 30 years ago needed to be developed. Both cities came together and created this district with kind of ignoring this idea of left or right side of the line. The MetroZone was kind of this special entity that would be incentivized through both communities, through resources, time and energy, and real dollars in investment in terms of incentives and capital contributions. So for 30 years, the idea was to share that revenue that the MetroZone produced between both the cities. That went on for a long time. As you're well aware, the City of Bloomington recently canceled their participation in that contractual arrangement of sharing the revenue. And that had a very real financial impact on the town. And now we're going to start feeling that impact. The decision was made some time ago, recently, to cancel that agreement on their side. But what does that do to us? Well, again, for 30 years, we were sharing the revenue 50-50. Now there's going to be no sharing of the revenue, and that has an impact of about $1.1 million in our budget. So right now, in our adopted budget, we have to pull $1.1 million out of this current year, which is frankly very painful, and then every year at least that much in the out years. So we through that action, we've dropped down $1.1 million in shared revenue that we originally were counting on as part of that agreement. And Bloomington, flip side, now has increased their revenue $1.1 million this year and then also in the out years. So that's going to create some significant real challenges, even beyond the issues of flat revenue sources that we're having to deal with. The state of Illinois did, I guess you could call it, did a money grab to all municipalities, and they affected Bloomington too, to all municipalities. They are now going to start charging every home rule community that has a home rule sales tax 2% to collect it, and this is something that you're well aware of. So the 1.1 to 1.2 million of loss in MetroZone shared revenue from that agreement, and then the 300,000 plus that we're going to have to pay the state to collect our sales tax for us, which they've done for years for free. It's getting to $1.5 million or so right there off the bat. So that's creating some challenges. So I don't want to just all gloom and doom. We are going into a challenging budget year. We're going to stress the operating budgets and capital budgets and contingency funds and our strategies. But we're going into it with a strong balance sheet, which we've always maintained. And this process of giving this report to you each year, where we look at 10 years of data and analyze it every single year, and our budget process, which consists of looking out 5 years, the goal there is to get to a very simple comment, no surprises on what's going on with the numbers. So we're not going to come to you in January for the budget work session or in March and say, we got a huge problem. You know about this problem right now because of the processes you put in place in terms of the finance department and giving you these information. The second thing is, I trust our budget process. I'm not going to lie, I'm very worried about this year going forward. This will probably be, from what I can see in terms of challenges in my tenure, probably the most difficult year we're going to be facing. But again, we have a budget process that's extremely efficient. With leadership from Ms. Reese and Mr. Peterson, from the council and the mayor giving us information really fast on questions and recommendations. We can adopt processes and make changes, I think, faster than anybody our size in terms of nimbleness to correct these issues. So again, we're going into it with a strong position. We have a very challenging budget year coming up next year, but we have a very strong budget process in place to manage these issues. So. That completes the presentation. I'll take any questions or other comments.
Comments or questions from the council? Apparently,
I just want to say thank you again for a very thorough telling of the story, as difficult as it is to hear.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Irvin. Can you hear me now? There we go. Just thanking you again for, in a very thorough, organized way that helps us to be able to do our jobs up here. And not the easiest report this year to give to us, but I think you're right. It gives us plenty of fair warning for the years coming ahead about the choices we're going to have to make up here. So thank you.
I would agree. It's every year this is a great guidebook for the council to talk about what we're doing with our constituents and really to give us kind of the I don't want to say executive summary, but a high level look at trends and where we're at. So it's very helpful for us in the years going forward.
Let me just add, if I can, Mayor, again, we've done this report for many years, and the good news is I don't think there's anything that Andrew shared with you that was a surprise. We've seen these trends. We've known they're out there. We always hope that in In cases of the bad ones, they change, and the good ones, they continue. And there's a lot of good information. There's a lot of good things that were reflected in this document, a lot of good trends. And some that are problematic that we're gonna have to address in this upcoming budget year. We're aware of that. It'll be be a tough budget year. There's no doubt about it. But we'll, as Andrew said, we go into the budget year in pretty strong financial position, and we'll work hard to maintain that. I guess there were two surprises. One is the new 2% collection fee that the state of Illinois has imposed, which was a surprise. In fact, I think most legislators didn't even know it was in there when they adopted the budget till they found out a few days afterwards. The other one, of course, is the Metro Zone, which is a very painful loss that we had not anticipated last year during this exercise, and that's a real loss of revenue that will make a difficult budget process even more difficult. But I do think what we're going through is further affirmation that this is a very good process, and it does allow us to make course corrections long before we're in a crisis situation. So we will be able to make corrections. Some will be difficult, but they're doable before we reach a point where we're in, a real world of hurt. And that's why I really appreciate this process. I think it's really a good one.
Further? Ms. Lorenz?
Just briefly, I want to reiterate some comments that I gave this morning. I was on a radio program first thing this morning, and I encouraged listeners there and anyone listening perhaps tonight that this financial trend and condition report is by far, I think, one of the better reports that our citizens can listen to really get a snapshot for what's going on, what's facing us. I think you said at the outset of your comments that, this really is then the beginning to the next budget process for next year and the out years. So, as we go through the news cycles and decisions are made going forward, this is really one to pay attention to because it's a foreshadow to what's to come. And I would just really encourage, for those of you sitting here tonight, go home and tell your friends and neighbors to look this up tonight, watch it back on YouTube. So very, very useful and very helpful. And I don't want to let it go without saying that some very encouraging news on the debt. And I think sometimes that has been, looked at from different points of view, and it was encouraging to hear what you said about that and how it's on the downward slope or something to that effect. So let's not lose that in all of the discussion as well. So thank you.
I just make one more comment, and Ms. Lorenz sort of triggered this in my mind. We try hard to make this a very accurate, objective analysis, and Andrew, is very upfront. We go through these trends and we have a lot of discussion. Some of them are obviously negative. Some of them, do we call this negative? Because we know people fixate on negative or positive, and so, but we try to be very honest here. And I hope people appreciate the fact that we're not hiding anything. And occasionally people will try to use that against us. Your own finance director says this is negative. Well, we're trying to be honest with people. Doesn't mean it's terrible. Doesn't mean it can't be fixed. We're just trying, I think Andrew's goal is just to try to give the community and the council a very accurate picture of where we're at. And on balance, there's a lot more positive in here than negative, a lot more positive. But we're also being honest with the fact that we've got some challenges. They're solvable. We know they're there. We're aware of them, and we'll have strategies to solve them. But I certainly appreciate the fact that Andrew comes in with complete honesty. And a lot of organizations, municipalities don't do that. They're gonna try to shape and spin everything. They've got, Dan Irvins of the world looking to how do we spin this in a positive way. Well, we've tried to be honest and objective, and no offense, Dan. Don't take any offense, because that's sometimes what he's paid to do. But the fact of the matter is, I think Andrew's trying to be very honest and provide not only you all with an honest assessment, but the community of where we're at. And I think on balance, it's a very positive report, but we clearly have some financial headwinds that we will work through, no doubt about it.
Thank you, Andrew. Our next item of new business is a motion authorizing the use of stop for pedestrians in crosswalk signs at Constitution Trail crossings at Locust Street, Willow Street, Lincoln Street, Shelbourne Drive, and Rab Road.
Move approval enthusiastically.
And Wayne Aldrich has a little show and tell for you here, I
All right.
think.
Wonderful.
Yes, staff is recommending these stop for pedestrians and crosswalk signs. We have one display. It's pretty heavy, guys. That's the mobile
There's a
sign, too.
workers' comp claim
So-
coming.
And we don't need one.
But this is the sign. This has been approved in the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. As you know, you've worked with us enough. We call that the MUTCD, so that's the document that is the guideline for basically all traffic control signs in the United States of America. So this has been approved. I think we first saw this sign about 8 years ago. But now the MUTCD has approved this sign for use actually in the crosswalk and in the center of the street. And so you'll see that a lot of places. I've seen it at a lot of school crosswalks and other trail crossings. That's the application. I had originally thought this sign would be placed ahead of the crosswalk, but actually the guidance says place it in the crosswalk and again in the center of the street. So we're proposing the use of these signs to basically remind the motorists of the state law. So in Illinois, the law says stop for pedestrians in crosswalks, and we're using it. We recommend the use at the intersections north of Mulberry Street. So Locust Street, Willow, Lincoln, Shelbourne, and Rab. And all these intersections are 2-lane streets. Willow is a 3-lane street. So we felt that that was a good application, again, initially to start the use of these signs. The sign is, you're seeing a one-sided sign. The actual sign will be two-sided, and just one installation at the crosswalk. This sign installation has been discussed on the town's Bike Ped Committee, and they recommended its use as well, and it's also supported by Bike Blow No and the Friends of the Constitution Trail. Again, it's just drawing attention to the state law, and I think the responsibility is with everyone, of course. It's not just the motorists, it's certainly with the trail users as well, to be responsible and to look and to be polite and safe. So really would like to use this sign, and we'll start putting this up if you approve them within the next couple of weeks. This is a mobile sign. We may see if there's another option. The sign has to be flexible. We intend to fix this sign to the street. Some of these signs are taken up and removed every day like at school crosswalks, but we intend to fix the sign in a more permanent fashion. Probably leave it over the winter unless there's problems. There might be issues with snow removal, but that's our intentions at this point.
Thank you.
Let me just add, with the signs comes an expectation of enforcement as well. So we will be doing some enforcement. I won't suggest we'll be out there 24 hours a day, but we will very closely monitor these things, and we'll do some special enforcement, particularly early on, to ensure compliance.
Great. Mr. Go to it.
Go to it. Well, I'm very excited. One of my personal things was beginning to address this, so I'm very excited. And thank you to staff and Mr. Peterson. Not early last week,
This guy too.
I was driving through a community that had those. And I said, man, I got to check up on when we are going to get these. And 2 days later, it was on my agenda. Thank you for.
Just thinking about.
I was going to say, I don't even have to call Mark Peterson anymore. He just reads my mind and it ends up on the agenda. Thank you for jumping on this. Just one question, and I looking at the streets where we're targeting now, I'm imagining there's some potential, I'm making up in my head that there's potential expansion plans based on
on what we find out from these?
Absolutely.
Do we want to, can you talk to us about that a little bit?
Other intersections, we're a little bit hesitant, like, for example, Vernon. Vernon's the intersection we get the most comments about. And I think that's probably the most problematic at Vernon, because it's a two-way, four-lane street.
Right.
Other intersections at like Mulberry Street or College, because they're one-way, they're still problematic because of the amount of traffic they carry and the speeds. But I think Vernon is the intersection we get the most comments on. And I think we're looking at Vernon with the uptown traffic plan this year, and Gene can talk about the schedule of that and what we might be looking for with that.
Yeah, the Vernon crossing, what I call the West Vernon crossing, we will be looking at that as part of the traffic study. It's part of the Uptown 2.0 study. Possible road diet on Vernon, which one would reduce the number of lanes that would have to be crossed. Two, it would possibly allow the construction of a refuge area in the middle if you got stuck. So those are some things we'll look at on Vernon. There's really only two other tools in our toolbox for these types of crossings, and that's rapid rectangular flashing beacons, which can be activated by a button, and those are a possible installation at a couple of the locations. Some of them we don't have enough traffic to warrant those. And then if you get into a real extreme situation, of course, you could go to a hawk signal, which is activated by the user also, and it actually stops the traffic. We did a real brief study at the Vernon crossing for one of those, and we were kind of right on the edge, whether it's warranted or not. You know, you could have made some assumptions and probably kicked it over, and you could have made some other assumptions and dropped it back some. And knowing that we were going to do this traffic study, we didn't think it was probably appropriate at this time.
Mr. Fritzen?
Yeah, you know, a street like Vernon is one that is a cause for concern from both the trail users and vehicular usage. And what kind of education are we going to put out to the public with this? Because this isn't a license to just walk out into the street and think that cars are going to stop. If you're in the crosswalk and cars are approaching, you're already out there, then they've got to stop. But if you're on you still have to proceed with caution into the roadway. So that educational component is the thing that's concerning, because all of a sudden these signs are up, and the streets where we're putting them are not going to be as problematic, obviously. And it'll give us, like, say, a good test to kind of see how this goes and the like. But yeah, the future of the busier intersections with streets like Vernon and like in Bloomington, you'd have Empire and the like, where you really need to make sure the pedestrians and the bicycle users understand, you know, what the sign's for. So.
Yeah, and we agree, and we're going to work with certainly the advocacy groups to help with that education. Bike Blow-No, Friends of the Trail, to help with that, and there may be other ways to get the word out. But yeah, very much it's a two-way street. Yeah, all the users have to pay attention to the rule. Yeah.
That is the one criticism that I've heard about these devices, is that may give pedestrians a false sense of security, because if there's a failure, if somebody fails to yield or stop, it's disastrous for the pedestrian, obviously. So that is a concern. On the other hand, this is not cutting edge. Communities across the country are going to these devices, and it seems the more garish and they are, the better. So it is becoming standard. I think people certainly of other places have gotten used to them, but you're absolutely right. You don't want to gamble with a car if you're a pedestrian. You're going to lose that no matter who's right or who's wrong. And so it does require that the pedestrians be very cautious as they step into that intersection.
No, that's one of the concerns with the rapid rectangular flashing beacons. They have been shown to increase compliance of the vehicles, you know, stopping or yielding for pedestrians, but there have been some instances where there has also been, you know, pedestrians or cyclists that press the button and have that feeling that I'm fine now. I press the button, the lights are flashing, I can cross the street, and there have been some fatal accidents in some other communities. And so that's always kind of a concern, that you're kind of reducing the user from being as vigilant as, because we've obviously got a very vigilant group of people using the trail because our crash history is reflective of that.
Mr. McBride?
Just a couple of things, just a comment, but I think what we're aiming at here is a culture change in our community and getting used to seeing these. And, you know, you would think that common sense would work. I mean, I was always taught, we taught our daughters when they were biking, you know, whether you're in a car or on a bike or you're walking, make eye contact. But not everybody does that, and there are drivers, and there are pedestrians, and there are bikers who don't. So hopefully we can do some positive good here. I do have a question, and I think I know the answer to this, but just to put it out there, would it fall, and I think most of you know I work on the Illinois State University campus, and along Main Street, it seems to me that in recent years there have been students are doing a better job of using the crosswalks instead of just crossing at will. Would it fall under the state's purview to have something like this at those crosswalks? Because I know Carbondale has them on their campus.
Yeah, on Main Street, it would, so we'd have to talk to IDOT about the application on Main Street.
Just a thought, something we might want to explore.
And again, it is in the MUTCD, so they can't say it's an experimental use now, and so that might sway them a bit.
Ms. Cummings?
First of all, I wanted to say thank you for these. This is something my husband and I have talked about quite often, as both being motorists and as well as users of the trail. And so we've seen where accidents have almost occurred just because, you know, they don't slow down or sometimes can't see. What is known about the sight vision, especially on, I believe it would be maybe Shelbourne, I think, is one of them where it kind of is a hill, not quite, but my concern is also visibility. I know it's bright, but when you're coming at an angle, making sure that there's clear visibility that you're, especially at nighttime, or as dusk falls, to continue to ensure the safety. And the reason why I ask that is oftentimes when you have people who are not familiar, you know, I think I could drive home, probably not literally, but with my eyes closed. My car knows its way home. But there are people who come to our community who are not as familiar, and if they approach and it's, you know, dusk or it's dark, they may not have the awareness to even look for these. I just want to make sure that, with the sizing and everything, that it's going to be something still visible, even at a distance.
Gene can talk about sight distance, but there are, there's standard, and I think we have these up in every location. If we don't, we'll put them up as advanced signage for the trail. And there are actually signage on the trail, actually to stop at an intersection. I think we're gonna leave those up because I think that's a good call to leave the stop signs up along the trail. And that just, more caution for the users. Sight distance is something we look at. All these things are important at all these intersections. Pavement markings, I think we've just restriped some of the pavement markings on these intersections as well. But sight distance and lighting is a consideration as well.
Yeah, given the height of these signs, they will only increase the visibility of the crossing. I think all our crossings have adequate sight distance, and you can actually see the traffic markings even as you approach. And then there, of course, are the advanced warning signs, and now with these signs even sticking up, above the pavement, I think they will only increase the visibility.
Ms. Lorenz?
This may be a dumb question, but I'll couch it in the sense of maybe the beginning of education, but can we review what the law is in terms of a pedestrian or a bicyclist? What's that point at which you are in the, maybe Police Chief Bleichner needs to come weigh in and have the trifecta up here.
I see hiding.
What is the rule? What is the law? How far do you have to be in the crosswalk in order for you to be now a pedestrian within the crosswalk, and therefore the motorist is liable to stop? So kind of like those bus laws, school bus laws. And we just need a little reminder from time to time. So take us down pedestrian crossing 101.
Well, I
had time to review that before I came up here, but I didn't, so. No, I mean, a lot of the comments that have been made here up to this point are spot on. I mean, it doesn't change the law. These are a great tool to hopefully increase safety within those crosswalks. But really, the law is written in such a way, and we do education and we do enforcement on it as it is, and that won't change, again, with just the presence of the signs. And that is a pedestrian who is in the roadway, on the half of the roadway in which a vehicle is approaching. So if you're traveling westbound and there's a pedestrian who's in the westbound portion of your lane, you're required to stop for that pedestrian. Or a pedestrian that's coming and is on the other half of the roadway. So if you're going west, a pedestrian who's on the other half of the roadway, which would be for eastbound traffic, you're required to stop if that person is close enough to be a potential danger or a threat. What it doesn't do is it does not require or allow that pedestrian to leave a point of safety and step out into the roadway. So in other words, if the person is standing on the curb and a car is approaching, that individual just can't carefreely step out into the lane of traffic, because then they become a danger not only to themselves but the motorists. So that's the basics of the pedestrian crosswalk. And so again, we will do that. It's a little bit subjective because sometimes folks will say, well, they're standing at the Ballards there where Constitution Trail is, a lot of times on Willow Street, and they'll say traffic's not stopping for me. Well, you're not required to stop. You're not in that portion of the roadway, or you're not on the other half of the roadway where you are potentially at threat or a danger. So we try and educate that, and we try and do it when we can. But when we do those, we'll find a few violations, but we don't see that many violations. So, but we'll continue. We continue to educate through Facebook and through, we'll do pedestrian awareness for pedestrian safety around this time of year, especially in and around Uptown and those areas where we have pedestrian accidents and crashes.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Please call the roll.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Cummings?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The motion is approved. That concludes our business. Before taking a motion for adjournment, are there concerns or comments? Mr. McCarthy?
I just want to remind everybody that Thursday night we have Light the Night, speaking of safety, where they give away head and tail lamps for safety, do basic bike checkups for kids, and it's a great event. Come on out if you got nothing to do. Bring your kids, bring your bikes, get a little safety tune-up, and come out and volunteer if you got some time.
Mr. McBride?
I just wanted to publicly commend our mayor for affixing his signature, along with a number of his mayoral colleagues around the country, to a letter in support of continuing the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivers program. Apparently, certainly the possibility exists that that plea is going to fall on deaf ears. If in fact that plays out that way, I don't know what the impact is going to be on our community, although I imagine there would be some. And I'm not sure what I can do from this chair other than to acknowledge and thank you for doing the right thing. So
Thank you. This is an issue we're all going to have to deal with, I think, and my reason for doing that was I would certainly like to see some common sense legislation to address this issue, and nod noted and well taken, Mr. Fritzen. I understand it's a tough environment out there, but we've got to keep pushing on these issues for our citizens.
Mayor, I'd just like to remind you, before your next meeting on the 18th at 5 o'clock, there's a meet and greet with groups of ISU students at the Medici, which we've been doing now. I think this will be the third or fourth year, maybe. I'd mentioned, I think earlier to you, a possibility of a fire station tour. Well, I forgot we had the meet and greet, and I'm not sure the fire station will quite be ready, so we'll probably schedule that the following week during we'll schedule a time where you can all just join us at the fire station, do a quick tour. It's getting very close. They're working on punch list items, but we're not sure we want to get hopefully some of the furniture in and a lot of it done before you tour it again. So we'll schedule that, but it will not be on the 18th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion for adjournment.
So move.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Cummings?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.